Hey, Teacher Thoughts here, coming at you with another video. I thought I would do a longer form update on the Venus flytrap that I've got out in my water feature. So I've decided to go ahead and move my Venus flytrap outdoors. I've got it in the same slightly submerged wire basket that I have the seedling tray in. This, I'm not seeing anything germinating yet in the Venus flytrap seed bed. I sprinkled a bunch of seeds in there. Well, it was June 4th, so about 25 days ago. So far, nothing has germinated in there, but I did decide to move this out here on its own. It does have another bloom spike that's starting to grow, so we're going to just let that be outside. We'll let it naturally pollinate, and then we'll harvest whatever seeds we have from that once they're dry and put them into the seed bed too, in the hopes that they are going to germinate and create for us some little new Venus flytraps. Now, one of the things with Venus flytraps is I've had them a lot when I was a kid. I've had them many years ago, but this is the longest lived one I've ever had. I've never had them survive a long period of time. I always forget to water them or something, and they die. But I've been growing this one with the bottom of the pot submerged in a little bit of water, and honestly, that seems to be the key. So south-facing window in a container of water, and seems to be very happy. Now, with a lot of my research that I've done lately, these are going to need to have a dormancy period. I don't believe that they are going to be able to survive outdoors here in North Idaho. It gets really cold here. We'll get minus 4, I think is the coldest I've recorded here at our actual place, but I know they can get actually much colder than that. So, yeah. I don't think it'll be outside, so I'll have to find a nice semi-sheltered location to let it go dormant this winter, something where it's got light. As far as my understanding, I can't let it be at normal room temperatures till then. So let's talk about something else that I noticed that you might find of interest. And it's something that I'm used to from where I grew up, but I know here in my part of North Idaho, it's actually fairly uncommon. So what we have down here growing in our Venus flytrap pot is a sporophyte of a fern. What we have grown down here in this pot is a volunteer fern. So it is the sporophyte version of a fern, and it took advantage of the nice moist soil to go ahead and germinate, and is currently growing into a fern. Specifically which one, I don't know. I don't recognize it, and kind of at this point it's going to be a little harder to recognize. That leads me to another thought. One I haven't talked about much, which is kind of the life cycle of ferns and how they're more unique, and they're much different than regular plants that we're used to seeing. A lot of us think that when we see a plant, that's the only version of the plant. But ferns, they're a little bit different. They actually have 2 versions of the plant. And I just did a post about it, about sword ferns. So if you go and look in my posts, you'll see me holding a little pinch of dirt that has these little tiny plants in them. And those are the gametophytes. So that version of that fern that we have back there is a sporophyte. It's the version of the fern plant that grows spores. And the gametophyte is the portion of the plant, or the separate plant, that actually produces the sex cells. It produces the egg and the sperm. So let's go look at another fern down here, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. So this is my Japanese painted fern. This was one that I was given recently, and I haven't yet had a chance to get it in the ground because I've been trying to decide specifically where I wanted it out here. I also had to do a little bit of research because I didn't know whether or not it was going to be cold hardy enough for this location. But during my research, I found out that it'll go all the way down to minus 40, which is perfectly fine for this area. So this is going to get in the yard fairly soon, right in my shade garden, and it will do quite well here. So this is another version of a sporophyte. So on the bottom side of these leaves, you can see those little tiny white patches. That's where the spores are going to develop on this fern. And those spores are going to produce a little tiny plant. You know, on sword ferns, the gametophyte is usually never more than a 1/4 inch in size. It's really, really small. And so these are going to produce that gametophyte. They're going to produce that plant that has the sex cells. It produces the eggs and it produces the sperm. So those little white patches on the bottom are where those spores are going to develop. Now those spores, that is the fern's version of the plant that is designed to travel distance. So those spores are going to be really light. They're going to either be transferred by wind, they could be transferred by water, or even they could be transferred by animals, by an animal brushing up against them. And that's going to allow that new plant to be a further distance from the original plant. It's going to give it a chance to travel. Now those spores, when they land in soil, they are going to go ahead and germinate. And sword fern spores, or sword fern gametophytes, so that's what's going to germinate from that little spore. Sword fern gametophytes are pretty much the only fern gametophyte that I've found, other than that one that I just spotted in my Venus flytrap. And the sword fern ones I found in the wild, and they're usually no bigger than a 1/4 inch in diameter. So they're really, really small, and they contain the reproductive cells. So the male and female reproductive cells, and they produce the eggs and the sperm. And with that, the reproductive cells, they mature at different rates. So each gametophyte or reproductive plant contains both male and female reproductive cells, but they mature at different times, so that each gametophyte is not fertilizing itself, it's fertilizing another gametophyte from that same fern, you know, or from that same fern species. So it allows that cross-pollination, if you will, to occur. Now the sword fern is really the only one that I have personally found. They're tiny, they're heart-shaped, they're smaller than a 1/4 inch. And I had a kind of a fun experience with that when I was in a plant morphology class, and we were talking about ferns, and we were talking about sporophytes and gametophytes. And I happened to be hanging out, having a picnic down in a wooded area on our college campus, and I had leaned over and was picking at the dirt and had noticed the little tiny gametophytes growing. And when I went back and talked to my college professor about it, he got all really excited because for him, he'd rarely seen gametophytes in the wild. They're uncommon to find because you got to get the exact right location. So we got the whole class together. We went down to this area, and I couldn't find them again. I felt so bad, but anyway, yeah, I found them when I was in college. I procured a bunch of samples of them. I prepared them up to make microscope slides out of them, ran them through the microtome, and they weren't oriented right. So I only got cross sections of the leaves rather than like a broad flat section. But some of the slides that I did produce in college were of sword fern gametophytes, which was kind of fun. Where I'm at now, I've been looking through the damp soil here. I just don't have enough ferns to have any sporophytes develop. There were some sword ferns here when I first moved in, but they died for lack of water. It was before I got the irrigation system rehabbed and back up and running. But I'm hoping eventually to get some more sword ferns here. Ferns are one of my wife's favorite plants, and for me, it's that fond memory of finding sword fern gametophytes when I was in college, which is kind of cool. So I'll keep looking and see if I can find some more. Or I'll try to get my hands on some sword ferns that have the spores, and maybe we'll grow them up as a part of an experiment once I get the greenhouse built here and up and running, which, yes, it's something I am planning to do. But anyway, if you're in the Pacific Northwest, look around in the dirt and some of that damp soil and in wooded areas, and look for these little tiny heart-shaped plants. If you need to see what they look like, go ahead and click on my post about sword fern gametophytes, and you get a picture of those. The sporophyte, or the regular fern that you recognize, is in the back, but in the front, in my fingers, is the gametophytes, which is a really, really tiny version of a fern. Anyway, I hope you learned something. I hope you enjoyed. Ag Teacher Thoughts out.